Happy New Year from your favorite podcast, Money Majlis. This is a Money Majlis extra episode to celebrate the beginning of yet another year, 2025, no less. As you know, in all the extra episodes, instead of talking about banking and fintechs and technology and marketing, I discuss happier topics that I'm passionate about in my personal life. One such topic is food. Yes, food. It is hugely important to me and I'm sure to many of you listeners. So I traveled all the way to Mumbai, India to talk to one of the most consequential food entrepreneurs of this decade. A young man who's redefining how people eat out in Mumbai. But first, a word from my sponsors.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by MasterCard.
Money Majlis is sponsored by Weo Bank. Fuel your ambitions with banking designed to power your success. Discover more at weo.io.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
Happy New Year from Mumbai, the commercial capital of India and possibly its food capital too. The restaurant and bar scene in Mumbai has exploded in recent years with a host of trendy places to go to. And today, in this Money Majlis Extra episode, I will be talking to one of the industry's youngest and most successful entrepreneurs, Sameer Seth of Hunger Incorporated Hospitality. Driven by the passion to build restaurants that fit the Indian context both socially and culturally, Sameer Seth, along with his business partner Yash Bhanage, have developed a range of successful food and beverage concepts like the Bombay Canteen, O Pedro, Veronica's, Papa's, and the Bombay Sweet Shop. Sameer has a bachelor's degree in chemistry from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi, and an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode. He began a career in banking before realizing that his interests lay in the world of restaurants and hospitality. His time at Shalom, New Delhi, became his education in the business, and he went on to pursue masters in hospitality management at Cornell University in the US. Subsequently, he moved to New York City, where he had the opportunity to work with some of the finest names in the business, Chef Daniel Boulud at the Bar Boulud and Danny Mayer at the North End Grill. It was here that he met late Chef Floyd Cardoz, who went on to become his mentor and later business partner at Hunger Incorporated. In 2013, that's exactly 11 years back, Sameer Seth and Yash Bhanage, his former classmate from Cornell, decided to collectively research and collaborate on developing restaurant concepts in India. They together set up Hunger Incorporated Hospitality and have since successfully opened multiple unique hospitality concepts that are now Mumbai's most popular F&B spots. These include the Bombay Canteen, which showcases the wealth of India's cuisine without borders by recreating local, seasonal dishes and reinterpreting age-old Indian culinary traditions with seasonal menus. O Pedro pays homage to the energy of Goa with a menu that brings back the fun of tropical living with simple, heartwarming food and drinks with influences from the state's Portuguese history. Bombay Sweet Shop is where they imaginatively reinterpret the gamut of traditional Indian sweets and mithai in a contemporary and fun format. Veronica's is an all-day sandwich shop in Delhi, and Papa's is a 12-seater chef's counter restaurant where Chef Hussein takes you on a dining adventure that is Indian in its soul and surprising in spirit. Through collective experiences across the food and beverage industry, Hunger Incorporated Hospitality aims to craft experiences drawing on shared memories of food and a true sense of what they call Indian hospitality. They also have an online food magazine called enthukutlet.com. Hello from Mumbai. I'm sitting in the lovely lobby of St. Regis Hotel in Mumbai, talking to Sameer Seth, a legendary restaurateur who has revolutionized eating out in Mumbai with his Bombay Canteen and now with a number of other concepts that we'll talk about. Sameer, welcome to Money Majlis.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sameer, let me start with your career, which is so interesting. You transitioned from an MBA at IIM to a consumer banker in Citibank way back in 2005 to a degree in hotel management, hotel administration, hospitality with Cornell University in the US, to a full-time career in food and hospitality. You are a founder and CEO of the Hunger Incorporated Group today, and you operate a number of F&B concepts in India that include Bombay Canteen, O Pedro, Bombay Sweet Shop, and a few others.
Right.
Was there a defining experience in your decision to enter this industry? Was there a moment when you said, that's my moment of truth, that's my calling, and I want to get into food? And if I may ask you, you had an undergrad degree in chemistry and then you did management. Have there been any learnings from your earlier careers in banking and your college degree in chemistry in what you do in F&B today?
No, thank you for that. And I think if you made me sort of go back in down memory lane, and I was thinking about, it was almost like my whole childhood was a little bit of a step up to the moment I wanted to pick this as a career, because I think I grew up in a house where every meal was spent talking about the next meal. So food was a very, very integral part of what one grew up with, and I've always loved food. But I think when it came to picking food as a career, it was interesting where mom and dad were always a little reticent about like saying, no, do a little chemistry, go to St. Stephen's College, go to an MBA first, because that might felt like a better quote unquote career option.
Very Asian parent kind of outlook, correct? Yeah.
But they are the most supportive parents one could ever ask for.
Uh-huh.
But I think if it, from a defining moment, there are certain memories which one has associated with enjoying food, which always stand out in my mind. I still remember as an 8 or 10-year-old, at some point, mom was traveling and dad decided to take my brother and me to Chandni Chowk. But he said not just go with him. There was a friend of his who I didn't know at that time was a professor at JNU for international relations, Professor Pushpesh Pant. And he, not known to either my brother or me, is one of the most legendary food writers India has produced. And to go to Chandni Chowk and have with Pushpesh uncle and like be sort of led down the streets of those neighborhoods and eat with him was something I will never forget. And I think while one didn't have the language back in the day, what's clear is that food and memory is what one was always inspired by. I think I got a little bit of a snippet of what it took to be in the hospitality space, organizing events in college, etc. And one got slowly drawn to that as a career. But I think the final tipping point for me came while I was in banking. To say that I wanted to make a go for it, and was fortunate enough to be able to join a small restaurant group in Delhi. And honestly, had the pleasure of joining them for almost 2.5 years. And then in the first 6 months itself, opened 3 restaurants with them.
Wow.
And I think I drank the Kool-Aid at that point, and there was no looking back from that point on. But when I look back at both those moments, whether it was studying chemistry and doing an MBA in my sort of academic life or doing banking as my first job, I think both of them helped set me up for my career in a way I would never have imagined it to be. So now when I look back, it was almost quote unquote meant to be. Chemistry has given me the training to sort of understand how food behaves.
Food chemistry
food
itself.
chemistry itself. I wish any of the professors had taken time to like teach us that. I would have paid a lot more attention. but that definitely helps me in good stead.
Yeah.
And honestly, nowhere else as a 22-year-old would I have been taught to read legal documents or do financial due diligence.
Correct.
And I was on the mortgage side. I was a credit analyst on the mortgage side of the business. The the understanding of real estate kind of came from those formative years. And
Yep.
like my life still involves sort of analyzing real estate and underlying contracts and legality around it.
Because real estate is a big part of a restaurant success,
Absolutely. It's
right?
the one,
Location.
location, and the one part of the business plan you can never change.
Correct.
And hopefully don't want to change.
Correct.
And actually, one of the things I saw very early in my career is how badly things can go if you and your landlord have not got contracts drawn up in the right way. And of course, negotiating a contract is a whole different ballgame. But
Yeah.
that attention to detail really came from my time in banking. And I think it's helped me in good stead.
Excellent. So both chemistry and banking has helped you do what you're doing.
Unknowingly.
But I tell you, life takes such turns, right? Samir, the F&B industry is known globally for being a tough industry to be in, right? Just talk about the Indian market. How do you think the Indian market has evolved since you started about 9 or 10 years back in India? And what major trends are you seeing now in terms of consumer preferences, in terms of cuisine, dining styles, and the new health constitutions that people have, especially people in your generation, millennials and Gen Z? What are you seeing as trends?
So I think when one started off with Bombay Canteen about 10 years ago, you were starting to see the age in which all things India was starting to become cool. We were one of the first restaurants off the sort of bat where we were reimagining an Indian restaurant. We weren't taking a Eastern or a Western concept and bringing it to India.
Yeah.
Because if you think the way you went out to eat back just a decade ago,
yeah,
if you wanted to go out eat Indian food, you either ate at home or you went to a North Indian restaurant, Copper Chimney, Moti Mahal, depending on where you were, or an Udupi restaurant for South Indian food.
Correct.
The beauty and the diversity of India was not celebrated at all. And I think that was where we saw the gap in the market to say that, no, Indian food can be really interesting. It's just that we are not cooking it the way it actually is unique. And that really became the focus of us opening. And I think people have doubled down on that today. Now there is such amazing regional concepts that you have, which are bringing to fore like all aspects of the beauty of Indian food. And I think that'll continue to be so. I think there is this huge India proud moment in India and a huge South Asia moment happening globally now where you're going to see this go from strength to strength, in my opinion. And I think that from a consumer point of view, what is happening now, especially in the last 4-5 years, is as people are traveling more, as people are going out more, they want that standard and that quality to come in here, which rivals that of anywhere else in the world. I think being in Bombay when we decided to start up in Bombay over a decade ago, I didn't think we would get the kind of global recognition we have been lucky to get. And it's also because the world has become a smaller place thanks to social media. I always say food is the new music. People find chefs and follow chefs as if they would follow musicians.
True, very true.
And are very, very interested in what they want to do. And I think that piece will continue to sort of grow and grow where you're going to see a lot more interesting things come out of the talent that is coming through the ranks now. We were fortunate enough over 15 years ago to be trained across the world and coming here. And I think we are now seeing alumni even who've come through Hunger Inc., which is our company, now open up and do restaurants, which we love going to. So I think the talent is certainly moving back from all over the world. Indians who've gone to get trained abroad are coming back and opening some amazing concepts. And you're going to see, I think there's that old saying, all boats rise with the tide. I think the tide's coming in. And that's the beauty of what's happening in India right now.
Samir, you have a number of concepts in dining that you introduced here in India, in Bombay and elsewhere. For the benefit of our listeners, why don't you tell us 3 or 4 concepts that you introduced?
Sure. Our first restaurant was the Bombay Canteen, which sort of celebrated and reimagined all things food in India. Learning from that was the fact that what really struck an emotional chord with people, and this is where I go back to food and memories in the early part. I think one has always tried to chase that dream. How do you connect food and memories together? Was we decided to say that, and that's what we learned, that what people are really appreciating is the reimagination of culinary traditions.
Yeah.
And O Pedro became our second sort of step towards that, where we decided to double down on Goan food and cuisine, and as an extension, Portugal, because Goa was a Portuguese colony for a long time.
Correct.
Chef Floyd, who was my co-founder, was originally from Goa and Bombay, and having him sort of bring his memories of food that he'd grown up with became an integral part of what O Pedro stood for. At that point, we really started asking the question, is the only way to scale a restaurant business in India to go from 1 to 2 to 10 outlets?
So how many years after Bombay Canteen did O Pedro open?
In 2017. So Bombay Canteen opened in 2015.
So
O
2 years
Pedro in
just after.
2017.
So you didn't wait to see the success of Bombay Canteen, or was it already successful?
So it was, the first 2 years had been a pretty good sort of reckoning from that perspective. Like it got great recognition and it was successful by all metrics.
Yeah.
For us, really, the trigger for opening a second one came because our team was itching to grow. And I think that really, Chef Hussain, who now leads the kitchens on all our restaurant, was a sous chef at Bombay Canteen, and he truly was wanting his own kitchen. And O Pedro became that first sort of stepping stone for him as well. But at that point, as I was saying, we really tried to figure out, is that the only way to grow is to open more restaurants, or is there another way? And going back to that thought that, no, actually what people are really interested in is seeing their culinary traditions being reimagined.
Yeah.
They were like, is there a product we can create? We experimented with everything from chutneys to papas to pickles. And what we slowly realized is those markets were very commoditized. Like to be able to actually create a premium product in those markets would be very hard. And actually it was on a trip via Turkey to New York where Yash, who's my co-founder, sort of connected the dots, so to speak, going to he was at Istanbul airport and saw sort of Turkish delights and baklava being sold.
Yeah.
And he had that aha moment that no one's doing this with Indian mithai. It's a longer story in terms of how he connected the dots, but that really was the crux of it. And
I mean, doing it nationally with Indian mithai. There are sweet shops in every city.
In every city, but not just that, but also if you think of it, we've grown up with the Kaju Katli.
Correct.
And nothing had
Well, I grew up with the Rasgulla in Calcutta, right?
And nothing has ever been done to sort of create something new out of it. Though that tradition has remained that tradition, and it's the same gap in the market we saw, which we observed 6-7 years ago with Bombay Canteen.
Correct.
And lo and behold, we were really surprised to see that literally no one was attempting it. That truly became and since you were talking about timelines, this idea came to us literally a month before O Pedro was opening, but we realized we knew nothing about the mithai world. And Floyd would actually always say, like, none of us were pastry chefs, none of us knew anything about the world of mithai, including him. As in, we've all eaten it, but it's technical.
Yeah.
We spent the next 2 years traveling the length and breadth of India because Floyd would always say, if you don't take time to understand tradition, you can never innovate. We were very fortunate to have Chef Girish, who was again had worked all over the world and moved back to India. He was a leading pastry chef in India already at that time. He was also very keen to sort of meld the two worlds of mithai and dessert.
Okay.
And we learned from halwais all over the country, and it took us 2 years to develop the concept behind Bombay Sweet Shop, and we launched in March of 2020. That obviously then came just in time before the pandemic, which was a roller coaster for us because very soon after Bombay Sweet Shop opened, we unfortunately lost Floyd to COVID.
Yeah.
And the next 2 years was literally about survival. The survival was inherent to what was happening at that time in every way, shape and form, but also because we had about 180 people working for us that time, we felt that we needed to be doing things which truly made us survive this period. We did a lot of things, including opening delivery brands, which would open only for 2-3 months at a time. And funnily enough, that's what led us to our next concept, because one of the delivery brands we sort of experimented with was our insight was people wanted comfort at home. So we just started doing sandwiches.
Okay.
And gourmet sandwiches, which you would not be able to have access to at home. And ever since Floyd had passed, we'd always wanted to do something in his memory to celebrate what he meant to all of us. He's a Bandra boy originally, not too far from where we are sitting. And his two loves were bread. He called himself a pawwala and fine dining. We on the market came a little property known as St. Jude Bakery, which was a historic old pav bakery in Bandra in 2022. And there was no business plan around this. It was just pure love where we wanted to do something to celebrate Chef Floyd's memory. So we opened Veronica's, which is a sandwich shop on the ground floor. And then earlier this year, we opened Papa's as an homage to him. We used to call him Papa Ji, which was to celebrate his other love around fine dining. So Papa's...
So why Veronica?
It's on Veronica Street. So it
Okay.
was very simple for us that we were on Veronica Street and we wanted to sort of pay homage to Bandra and the bread baking traditions of Bandra, and hence imagine an old pav bakery turning into a sandwich shop.
Yeah.
And Papa's is a 12-seat chef's counter where Hussain goes wild. There is no cuisine as such. It's whatever he wants to paint that day.
That day. Okay.
So
And it's everyday dining. You can do every day.
it's 4 days a week.
Okay.
It's only 12 seats. So
So bookings are way in advance.
yeah, we're booked out till January right now as we sit.
Wow. Okay.
And we've been very fortunate.
So my next trip to Mumbai, I'm going to use my connection with you
100%.
to get a seat there. Okay. Okay.
And in all of this, we've also created, so much of food is about storytelling. So we've created a online food magazine called Enthu Cutlet, which tells stories of food in India. So
Is it a digital magazine?
it's an original magazine. No, so it's all digital.
Okay.
And actually, some of the things we were talking about before we started recording about reading, about podcasting, it's all things we're dabbling in.
Okay.
And seeing how do you tell stories which people remember. And because food is not just about what comes on your plate, it's about what happens around you.
And the whole expectation of
the
it.
whole
The
expectation.
whole imagery of it.
Exactly.
So are you going to start a podcast on food at some point?
We've talked about it, but not yet. Right now, we're very focused on sort of telling the stories through social media and the other digital channels that we have. So that in a long nutshell is the 6 brands that we run.
6 brands total, yeah?
6 brands.
Okay. And tell me, of which the scalable brand at the moment is Bombay Sweet Shop?
Correct.
So that's the one you're looking to scale up.
Correct.
You're not
Absolutely.
looking at opening up Bombay Canteen. Well, it's a Bombay Canteen, but can it be in Delhi? Can it be in
Technically,
Chennai and Calcutta?
100%. It technically can be. And we've chosen not to only because we feel the level of service, the level of attention to detail, I think gets harder and harder as you scale to different geographies. So never say never. I think we'd love to open a Bombay Canteen in Dubai, in London, etc. Where as now the teams are growing again, their ambition is something which we are always very cognizant about. And for us, but Sweet Shop remains the focus in terms of scaling. So if the question in 2020 was, will people buy a premium Indian mithai? The answer is a resounding yes. In 2024, as I sit with you, we've just finished Diwali. We now have 18 dark kitchens across Bombay. We ship all over the country. We just opened our 3rd physical high street location in Kala Ghoda for Bombay Sweet Shop. So we're truly trying to sort of create the scale playbook here in Bombay for it to then hopefully go to other geographies.
And the dark kitchens are only for Bombay Sweet Shop, not for Bombay
only
Canteen?
only for Bombay Sweet
So
Shop.
would you deliver Bombay Canteen home?
We do from Bombay Canteen, but honestly, it's not a very big part of our business. I think the pleasure of eating Bombay Canteen is at Bombay
experience
Canteen.
itself, yeah.
And a lot of what we do, even as a product, as an experience, is focused on creating the best version of that. There was a time in 2020, 21, for obvious reasons, where a lot of the focus was on delivery at that time, given the dining out restrictions, etc. But it's that behavior we've seen totally go back to people wanting to come back in store and sort of enjoy that experience in person.
Talking about Bombay Canteen, it is one of my favorite restaurants in
Thank you.
town, in India and in Mumbai. And it keeps winning multiple industry awards, right? It's now voted as one of the top 50 bars in Asia, and recently was selected by Financial Times as one of the 2 favorite restaurants of their journalists and correspondents in the city. Tell me, Sameer, what does it take to maintain the quality and reputation of a F&B outlet like Bombay Canteen? And how do you blend mixing innovation with tradition that you talked about before? How does that magic come alive in a place like Bombay Canteen? How do you maintain the standards?
I think it's one of the biggest misnomers of our industry is it's all about creativity. I think 90 to 95% about it is consistency.
Yeah.
And here I have to give a special shout out to my co-founder Yash, who is, I think, one of the most attention to detail human beings I have ever met, where I think it's his sort of rigor, which we've all sort of learnt in a way, to say that how do you maintain that consistency? Like how do you build processes and systems which allow for that to happen? And how do you build a team and a culture of an organization that allows both creativity and consistency, which have a natural conflict actually to thrive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's not like we came through with the perfect answer on day one, but it's a everyday grind in terms of how do you keep the ball rolling in a way that when a guest walks in, they have a great experience. And a lot of it actually has to do with the service and the what we call we have now, let me dial it back a little. I think what naturally came to us when we started the restaurant in 2015 was Yash and I were there on the ground every day in terms of being able to create that experience for guests and being able to adjust the dial, whether to the left or the right, to make sure that it was perfect every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've now had to create a language, and we are now almost 450 people at Hungering,
Wow.
where I think a lot of things get said about culture and values in organizations. So creating that language has been a big part of what we've done over the last 2 years.
Correct.
And one of the biggest foundational cornerstones has been what we call hospitality first. And how do you instill that idea of being there for our guests, being there for each other in a way that truly, truly makes it an enjoyable place to work, but also then in turn makes it an enjoyable place for our guests to come interact with us, irrespective of which outlet they go to.
Yeah.
And I think hospitality first is one of the 6 values that we sort of profess. Part of it is consistency, part of it is experimentation, and it's a constant conversation internally. And how do you keep having that again and again and again?
Correct.
So from on the consistency part, it's the sort of creation of this language that's really helped. And on the creativity part, I think that what really helps is having amazing individuals like Girish, like Hussain. There are many more in the organization who work under them, as well as on now we have where in the beginning it was all about food and service. Storytelling is an equally important part. So we have a whole creative team of almost 20 folks who now work full time with us.
Okay.
Led by our creative director and our marketing head, Madhu and Namita respectively, who sort of truly sort of push the boundaries in terms of how do we tell stories in a
So
more
20
interesting.
people creative team.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a
I wouldn't
mini
imagine-
agency that kind of works in-house now. Because running 6 brands and given the pace at which you have to run social media, on-ground events, etc., it truly requires that constant focus to be able to actually bring all of this to life.
Tell me, talking of creativity, I mean, I had an excellent lunch at Bombay Canteen yesterday. And I noticed the menu had changed substantially since I last came a few years back. How do you balance keeping, maintaining a core culinary philosophy, let's say, with the need to keep the menus fresh and exciting for your customers to come back? How do you decide what to keep and what to drop on the menu?
What to keep and what to drop is actually kind of easy, where either the ingredient goes out of season or it's really doesn't, from a data point of
So
view.
you're
doesn't
seasonal
show.
as well
We are
in your
very, very
menus.
seasonal.
Okay,
So one of
okay.
the core tenets of Bombay Canteen is that we try to use seasonal ingredients as much as possible, as well as then be able to keep things changing, not for any other reason, because I also think it becomes boring after 10 years to keep eating the same thing.
Because your regular
Also,
customers, I guess, who keep
not just
coming.
not just for the guests, but also for the team to
Chef,
keep cooking
yeah.
the same thing. How do you keep pushing and inspiring them? A large part of that inspiration comes from learning new things and being exposed to different ideas and thoughts, which is why today, like, we love to do takeovers and pop-ups, as they're known, where other chefs come and cook with us, or we travel to other countries or other cities to be able to do that, because how else do you keep learning? And I think that balance comes, there are certain things like the eggs kejriwal or the prawns aglio olio, which will never go off, or the Bali salad. But everything else, honestly, keeps rotating.
But tell me, would you risk, or do you risk upsetting customers who love a certain item on the menu and they say, can't find it anymore?
I think people do tend to start getting upset till they talk to one of us and we excite them about something else.
Okay.
And I think it's easy to excite someone when you are excited about it yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that plays a huge role from
So
a service point of view.
storytelling is a big part of what you do,
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now that's interesting. But tell me, talk about stories. We see today an explosion of dining concepts with new outlets opening every day, right? Whether it's India here, or where I live in Dubai, or, across the world. But we also see a lot of mortality, right? The Economist recently had an article, which I'm sure you read,
Yeah.
which talked about the fact that receiving a Michelin star can actually accelerate mortality for a restaurant. I don't know what your views on this are. What do you think is the ideal level of recognition that a restaurant should receive? Is something called too much recognition? Is that a problem as well?
I think that is deeply personal to each individual, and I'll tell you the reason for that. I think validation is extremely important.
Yep.
I think we all thrive of it. I think the problem arises when the validation becomes the reason for being, and there is no internal sort of anchoring in terms of what the person is standing for, and their identity is defined by that outside validation only. I think then that almost becomes a double-edged sword where you're working towards a goal of being on this list or for that award.
You're chasing awards.
You're chasing awards versus the best version of the product that or the experience that you can create.
Yeah.
So that balance is needed, and this is a conversation we have very actively and honestly amongst ourselves. I think actually Floyd would always say something to us, which is maybe that's what's grounded me and us in a big way. You're never as good as they say. You're never as bad as they say. And
Interesting.
it's one of those things where I think you need to have your feet firmly planted to say that, yeah, because at the end of the day, you had a great meal yesterday at Bombay Canteen, but imagine if that meal was not great.
Yeah.
And we would be having a very different conversation today. You're as good as the last meal or the last drink you serve someone. So that's I think that's what we keep repeating constantly, that's what we are working here towards, to give that consistently. And I think that's what, it's funny, I don't think anyone speaks of going to a restaurant in the form of trust. But subconsciously, when you go back in my opinion, when you go back to a restaurant again and again, you're trusting them to give you something that is solid, which is not going to get screwed up. And that's why you're going back again and again.
But tell me, how do you keep an ear out for complaints and suggestions? How do you listen to your customers?
That, I think, is a constant conversation where in some of the restaurants where we have a very active feedback mechanism at the restaurants, but it's also, we encourage our teams to have conversations, to pick up on body language. Like it's very clear if you have worked in this industry where someone's not having a good time. So how do you step in and have that? And in the case of, say, something like Bombay Sweet Shop, we're constantly scanning various digital platforms, etc. for where I think the danger there for overlooking for not overlooking, but looking for too much feedback is that you tend to then keep changing things. I think the way we look at it is, let's look for the larger trends of what's happening. Is that a symptom of something that's going wrong in the processes that we've set up? And then let's address the root cause over there. Because otherwise you actually, like I remember when Bombay Canteen opened and I fell prey to this actually. I would obsessively look at TripAdvisor and Zomato reviews in the first 6 months. Till it became unsustainable. I can keep looking at it, but it's not like I can change anything. And we got our lesson on this very early on, by the way. First 6-8 months, we got panned for the vegetarian food we were serving.
Oh, really?
Because honestly, we were 4 non-veg guys who had decided to open this restaurant, Chef Floyd, me, Yash, and Chef Thomas. And every idea for a vegetarian dish was an offshoot of like that original idea, which is not that exciting. I have to be brutally honest about it. It was not, like, some of it was good and some of it is still on the menu, but some of it was not good. It took us a solid 12 months to figure out how to create exciting dishes on the vegetarian front. But it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't listened to feedback. We were getting that feedback consistently. And if we hadn't listened to it and said, take it or leave it, that we might not be having this conversation today. So
Correct.
I think, again, it's a very philosophical, foundational thing of how do you look for those trends, but constantly keep listening. Not everyone's opinion will be the right one. And the danger of this is also that you can't be everything for everyone. There are certain things your product is and will continue to be, and you have to stand by it. Suddenly, I'm not going to start serving pizzas at Bombay Canteen just because there's a market for it. And that's the danger.
You do what you believe in, right?
Absolutely.
Samir, talking of being everything for everyone, can I point you to the next sofa where we have 2 guests in the lobby wearing Bombay Canteen t-shirts? It says it says, it's a good day to Bombay. That's your t-shirt, right?
That is funny.
That's funny, right? You're sitting right next to these 2 ladies who seem to be from somewhere overseas, having a conversation and wearing these t-shirts. Is merchandise a big part of how you spread your story?
It's starting to become.
Okay.
Honestly, it wasn't. These t-shirts were made about a couple of years back. when we actually renovated Bombay Canteen and sort of created. And I think that's another part which has helped us, that we realized when Bombay Canteen was about 7 years old, it needed a little bit of an uplift. It needed to speak in a different tone. So that line is one of my favorites. It's a good day to Bombay. It really it creates an emotion and makes you smile.
Yeah, it does.
Because Bombay as a city truly is full of emotion.
Yeah.
And I think we sort of played into that. So we actually had very active conversations right now about the fact that how we can create more fun storytelling devices through merchandise. But is it a big part of what we do right now? No, it's not.
Are there any plans for you to multiply the outlets of Bombay Canteen in Bombay itself? Is that something you're looking
None
at?
whatsoever.
No?
None
You're very happy with one
Very
outlet?
happy with one.
And that works for you to have
Absolutely.
a destination?
Absolutely.
People come there?
Just because you open 10 kilometers away doesn't make it more of a attraction for people. In fact, in a way, it's counterintuitive, but it reduces the excitement around what the original destination stood for. And I think that's the thing with scale. I feel scale is eventually a function of process. It's experience is a function of the uniqueness you can bring out of something. Scale is a function of process.
Yeah.
And again, how do you, even while scaling, how do you create those systemized touch points which allow for that aha moment to happen?
Yeah.
Before we started recording, you were talking about a check-in process.
Yeah.
Imagine check-ins happen all over the world.
Yeah.
And there was a story which was actually, I just heard last week. So there's a gentleman, his name is Will Gidara. He's written this book called Unreasonable Hospitality. And I was hearing a talk by him last week, an online session. And he was talking about a check-in process somewhere in the US where he landed at 4 a.m. And one of the worst things is like you dread like just standing around for 20, 30 minutes.
Correct.
And he was amazed that he flew in at 4 a.m. and he was just handed his keys and don't worry about it. Just come tomorrow and we'll finish check-in in the morning. Imagine, because you're so tired, you just don't want to stand.
Yeah.
And he went back the next morning to check in, etc. And he was relating the story from the point of view that he found the GM and thanked the guy, like to thank the front desk agent that, oh my God, what an amazing job he did. Like, it was actually not about the agent. We now just have, this hotel was, I think, somewhere in the south of the US. It was like, we know when these conferences happen, people fly in at all orders. We just now have a system. If anyone's coming after 2 a.m., we just let them check in the next morning.
Really?
Go sleep. So you can actually systemize hospitality in a really interesting way where it feels personal and yet it takes the sort of thinking out of it in a way, but still is process driven. So there is that balance that can be achieved if it's done with the right thought process.
Of course, you don't run a hotel, you run restaurants. Tell me, does the restaurant also have a check-in and check-out process?
Absolutely. The first time you call us to make a reservation, I feel the experience starts right there. We focus a lot on how do we make sure that you get served even over a phone call. And even while someone is leaving, depending on what kind of mood they're in, if you're there for a business meeting versus a long, leisurely tasting experience that we do, we have different ways of sort of focusing on how to create that experience in the perfect way. And we actually break it down with the team so that there is that confidence that's instilled in them, so that eventually all of this is a function of confidence. I loved the story you just told me about what happened. I don't know if you want to relate that to that
About
story.
the checkout experience?
About the recipe that you...
I was at Bombay Canteen yesterday and we loved a dish, a chicken korma dish, which I haven't had before. It was really yummy. And my wife wanted to know the recipe. And I said, well, I'm meeting Sameet tomorrow. You know what? I have connections. I'll give you the recipe. And the waiter serving us overheard and walked up and said, sir, I can give it to you.
Absolutely.
I thought it was really empowered, right? In terms of
Absolutely.
conversation. And he's not the chef. He's just a waiter. And he said, ma'am, this is how it is made. They're the ingredients. And, my wife and my guests were absolutely delighted to get that. I'm assuming it was authentic recipe that he was giving us.
Absolutely. I hope so too.
But, we said this morning, my wife and our hosts, where we're staying this time in Bombay, said, we'll try this out. We heard the recipe yesterday. Let's try it out. Now you now have, two of your customers trying out a recipe they heard about yesterday. Now that is spreading stories, right?
Absolutely.
About Bombay Canteen, which I'm sure it'll please you to hear the story. Right?
It pleases me in more ways than I can even describe. I'll tell you why, because I still remember when we opened in 2015, similar instance where someone asked for a recipe, and I think we were unsure of what to do because first time someone was asking for a recipe.
And do normally
And-
restaurants give recipes out? Normally
no,
not,
and this
right?
is where it comes, where Chef Floyd was standing there. He was like, absolutely, give the recipe. What better way of spreading the gospel of what you're doing than someone loving it so much that they want to cook it themselves?
And don't think people can recreate what you create there, right?
And exactly. People get afraid, oh my God, like it'll get copied. No, it's not, because what you're eventually having in our spaces is a function of so much more than just the food. It's about what that server made you feel while he was
Correct.
having that conversation with
Correct.
you. And a large part of what we try to focus on, you use the word empowered right now,
Yep.
is in India culturally, if you think of it, service has an equal servitude. And we really, really have wanted to break that down more than anything else, where we want to empower our teams to say that you are free to make people enjoy themselves in whatever way they should. If you find it's easier to do that in Marathi or Hindi,
Do
go
that.
for it. There is no restriction on having to do it in English.
Yep.
And that's one of the small ways in which we do it. And this again is a large part of the conversation that we continue having with our teams to make sure that we're able to create that culture in which they can thrive in.
Talking of culture, it is the industry, the food industry has incredibly high standards, high demands on people, and obviously has high turnover rates, right, compared to other industries. What strategies do you use, Sameer, to maintain a passionate team that they stay with you? I mean, the person who spoke to us yesterday has been with you since inception, right? Last 10 years, he said he's been with you.
Yeah.
So how do you keep, that fire going?
I think the fire is a function of motivating them in different ways. Now, the motivation can happen through spending time with each other and having great conversations, but also through creating that culture which I was referring to, which actually empowers them to feel that they have a sense of ownership in what is happening on the ground. I remember when I started off in this industry in India, there's a ritual in every restaurant across the world known as lineup. It happens before every meal service, where you're basically talking about what's coming up in the next few hours.
Like a huddle.
Like a huddle, exactly. Now the question for us is, you can either use the huddle to be very operational and transactional. There are X number of reservations. This is what we need to be doing for that. Or you can take those 15 minutes and actually talk about and make it a learning experience. So over the years, we made our lineups to be learning experiences. We now focus a lot on training across the board in terms of not just people leveling up, but also on a day-to-day basis. How do you really create those conversations that allow for people to feel that they are being pushed and they're learning new things, they're being exposed to different things. I was referencing doing pop-ups and takeovers where
Correct.
teams are coming in and going out. So I think instilling that sense of curiosity as well as then that confidence is truly the two pillars on which I feel we've been able to create that environment in which people can thrive and want to continue working with us.
But tell me, do job roles change in restaurants? Have you had waiters, serving staff who graduate to becoming chefs or sous chefs? Does that happen
in
often?
certain cases, yes.
Yeah.
Also, what's been interesting, we now live in a time and age, I am an example of that, where so many career changers joining us.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it really interesting as well, where today we have such a diverse group of individuals working at Hunger Inc. And it's not just restaurant roles per se. It's also because Bombay Sweet Shop is such a different business model, as well as now our head office creative teams and other finance and HR people teams are so different. I think that diversity has been amazing to see the magical effect it has. A few years ago, for example, Yash and I realized that one of the biggest roadblocks to us scaling is us actually, because everything was coming to us for decision making.
Correct.
We created the founder's office. Shweta, who joined us as our chief of staff at that point, now leads the people function for us. She's an ex-pastry chef who went on to work with Google and came back to India, and we met at an event and we sort of started talking. Was there a role that could have existed for a pastry chef like hers? when she started off, or would she have imagined? I don't think so. But she leads the people and
Amazing.
strategy function for
Amazing.
us today.
Mm.
Similarly, her replacement today is a young guy called Josh, who is an he's an architect originally.
Mm.
Started his own quick fast food concept here in Bombay, and then has come and joined us as chief of staff.
Okay.
And really interesting set of experiences that he brings to the table. So I think, and these are just two examples that I'm giving you specifically. We are littered with such examples in the most beautiful way. And I think that diversity is truly what makes it really interesting.
Talking of diversity, you have so many dining concepts, Sameer. How do you ensure that these concepts don't overlap with each other but complement each other? I know they are different verticals. Is that a challenge or it's not a challenge?
Not really, to be honest. We don't think of them as overlapping, and even if it's a problem. In fact, today I think we are probably the only restaurant group in India which, maybe not the only, but I think it's something we are very aware of, right from having a quick sandwich at Veronica's to a great coffee to having a 4-hour dining experience at Papa's. We cover the whole gamut. And what's interesting is we can now, depending on what mood you are in, you can come and have a meal with us and dine with us. In fact, one of the most beautiful things that we saw happen this year as part of scaling Bombay Sweet Shop was we entered into a partnership with Starbucks here in India, where for the last 1 month, for all 450 stores of Starbucks had a Bombay Sweet Shop menu running in them.
Really?
And
Was it a temporary thing? Or
yeah, it was a 1 month Diwali
special. Okay.
And we created products with them. We created certain recipes with them. And suddenly we are getting messages of people enjoying what we do here in Bombay, in Indore, in Guwahati, in all over the country.
This is global. This is India-wide.
All
Okay,
454 stores of theirs carried a Bombay Sweet Shop menu this Diwali. And it's amazing to see as you scale and you have more and more people enter the fray. We are being able to touch so many more lives, and that really is been a beautiful thing to
So will this
observe.
happen every year now, or?
That's our hope and dream. We're talking about it.
Okay.
But it's been amazing to sort of, again, partner with brands such as Starbucks. We've done things in the past with Parle-G, and Netflix and Amazon, to say like how can we create experiences and products which truly leave that lasting memory again.
But tell me, you obviously did this with Starbucks, India-wide, and Starbucks is a global brand. Is there opportunity to take this global? As in go outside India with Bombay Sweet Shop, with Starbucks on your own? Is that a possibility?
On our own, 100%, I think. But we are at a phase where Bombay Sweet Shop is now completing 5 years, of which the first 2.5 years were the pandemic.
Yeah.
I feel we are learning how to walk before we start running, which is the scale playbook I was referring to. I think a large part of it is figuring all of this out because, again, how do you keep this consistent as you scale? How do you create the right supply chain model? But our ambition is definitely to see, like, I would love for people to recognize Bombay Sweet Shop as their version of India, which they carry out into the world. I think the origin story of Bombay Sweet Shop started at an airport. We'd love for it to be, and it happens
And
like,
different airports
at
globally.
different airports globally, to see, like, actually a friend last week sent a picture of someone's airport trolley filled with Bombay Sweet Shop bags. They were clearly traveling somewhere with gifts for Diwali.
Really?
So it's happening slowly, but we're in no hurry.
One issue with Indian dessert, some people say, is it's too sweet. Do you have variant which are not as sweet?
Absolutely.
You do.
The thing actually, when we started doing our research in the whole mithai category, goes back to chemistry. Sugar is a natural preservative. So rather than reduce the sweetness, people have over the years upped the sweetness to increase shelf life. And that's kind of the reason why things have gotten sweeter and more ickier as time has gone along. But if you have original home recipes of traditional mithai even, they were never that sweet. So one of our largest selling products today is the butterscotch barks, the chocolate barks as we call them.
Amazing.
It's actually sohan halwa in the middle, which is like butterscotch, coated with dark chocolate, almonds and sea salt. So the salt brings the balance back.
Yeah.
Similarly, we were talking about Kaju Katli and Rasgulla earlier.
Correct.
This year, both those have been our highest selling products, but not in its original form. The Rasgulla now is dipped in espresso and forms a coffee Rasgulla tiramisu.
Wow.
and where white chocolate and mascarpone give that balance to the rasgulla. And similarly, the Kaju Katli now, as we sort of layer the Kaju Katli with dark chocolate ganache and cut them into these tiny cubes. So as you're having a bite, you're having sort of 55% dark chocolate with Kaju Katli, and that the various textures, the flavors of the
All work
chocolate,
together.
the bitterness of the chocolate work with the Kaju Katli beautifully.
Correct.
To bring that balance again.
Correct. I must try that sometime soon.
We'll make sure you have it before you leave.
You referred earlier to COVID-19, which affected, of course, the entire F&B industry globally very severely. Probably one of the sectors that was one of the worst affected was F&B. What is the biggest lesson that you learned from that experience? I know you lost one of your founders in that process. What lessons have you taken forward? And has it reshaped your approach to how you do business?
I think the word that popped into my mind immediately as you asked this question was one of resilience. I think we are all made of a tougher grade of metal than we assume we are. And I think that period has truly brought, for me personally, and I know for us, other individuals in our team, including Yash as well, life into perspective of what it truly matters, which is been great to sort of anchor ourselves into. And I think for us, I think one of the things we always try to say is like, let's take our work seriously, but let's not take ourselves too seriously. There is enjoyment in what we are doing. The very reason for existing is to bring joy to people's lives.
Correct.
And if we are in the process not enjoying ourselves, what's the point of doing it? I think those two have been those two thoughts of resilience and joy have truly been shaped through what we went through during the pandemic. And I'm sure it'll continue to evolve, but I think there's something, both these thoughts are something we think a lot about.
Well said. Well said. Samir, do you have a personal favorite dish across your restaurants? Yeah.
It's a tough one. Honestly, this last 2 weeks I've been binging on the Kaju Katli dark chocolate. It's called Indie Bites.
Given the Diwali season.
Given the Diwali season.
Yeah.
But also for me, like I think it keeps changing. If I go to Veronica's, I was craving the po' boy we make the other day versus at home we had a few friends come over and we lapped up Bombay Canteen biryani day before. So I think it keeps changing.
And when you're not at work, what kind of food do you enjoy? When you're not dining,
honestly, the
at
simpler
restaurants?
the better now. I think, yes, I do love to go out to the fine dining restaurants because there's a certain aspect to the ritual that I love and there's a beauty in the choreography around it.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate enough to be traveling with my wife last month and we were in the south of France and just a simple steak and fries was the best meal I had.
And when you go into a restaurant anywhere else, are you overcritical of what you see around you?
No,
the table service, the food presentation, etc.?
I think you're noticing everything, but honestly, the feedback is not required at that time. I think if there is something drastically wrong, yeah, you will go out and say it, but I think we are all sort of constantly scanning our environment and noticing things. And if there is something worthy of feedback, yeah, you go for it. Otherwise,
but you chill and enjoy otherwise.
There's no point. Otherwise, there's no point. This goes back to that feeling of joy that I was talking about a little earlier.
Correct. My final question to you, Samir. For young entrepreneurs looking to enter the F&B space today, what advice would you offer them? What kind of foundational values do you think they should prioritize?
I think, honestly, everyone has their own journey. I think like I was talking, and I think I think there is a certain aspect that we are seeing today is that people come to us, just the way I was out asking questions in 2007 about should I join, should I not join. I think the two pieces of advice that helped me then, I think will be as useful today. One was go do it from the point of view, like this is a very, you learn on the job kind of space where till you've not done it, till you've not sort of gone and sort of stood for that first 12-hour shift, you don't realize the physicality of the job. And this is not to demotivate anyone. This is just the reality of what this entails. And two, I think go seek and organize it. Like, I think there's something to be said of going and even if for a few months, working with someone who's willing to teach you. It goes back to, one, the part is go do it so that you understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
But two, go find people who are willing to teach,
Mm.
which truly then opens your minds in the different ways of being able to do it.
Mm.
I think, again, some of the great advice I got when I was working in New York is go work with different kinds of organizations, not for any other reason, is because no one has the perfect answer. But maybe there are aspects of which you can pick up which are really good, and you build your own thought process around it. So I was fortunate enough to work with Chef Daniel Boulud in New York City, then with Union Square Hospitality,
Yeah.
before that in Delhi, and even with Citibank. Like I think
Yeah.
a lot of what we are moving into a larger scale organization. So I am now finding myself falling back to things which I kind of ran away from initially. Performance appraisal systems
Yeah.
is the most, like, it was like, oh my God, like I never want to work with a company again where I need to, but the reality is that ritual
You have to have-
allows for a 500-person organization to structure things a certain way.
Correct.
The amazing part is we get to do it our way now.
Yeah.
We don't have to make it boring, and
Yeah.
we don't have to make it filled with dread. You can actually make it something which there is a thought process on how it can be hospitable to our teams. And that to me is really, really important.
Samir Seth, restaurateur, banquet and restaurateur, I should say, founder and CEO of Hunger Inc. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. This has been such a great pleasure to be on this one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by MasterCard.
Money Majlis is sponsored by Weo Bank. Fuel your ambitions with banking designed to power your success. Discover more at weo.io.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
So that was a New Year special conversation with the iconic restaurateur Samir Seth, who's as passionate about hospitality in his outlets as he is about the quality and presentation of his dishes. Thank you for listening. I don't know about you, but after that talk of food, I'm feeling very hungry. So it is time to sign off for today. Before I go, I want to say a huge thank you to my friend Arun Seth, who helped arrange this interview with his son Samir Seth. He must be one proud dad. I wish you a safe, happy and healthy 2025. Until next time, stay well and do good.